My name's Daniel, and I'm 52. Or I was back when everything started falling apart. People ask how a guy like me walks out on his whole life without warning. No dramatic fight. No packed bags. Just gone. But the truth is, it wasn't sudden. It was slow. Like that story about boiling a frog, throw one in a pot of hot water, it'll leap right out. But if you heat the water bit by bit, it'll stay put until it's cooked. I was that frog, sitting there, decades in. And I didn't even realize I was cooking until someone plopped a crown on my head that said King of Disappointments right in front of everyone I once called family. Let me rewind. I'd been married to Tessa for 28 years. We met in college. She was bold, magnetic, the kind of woman who lit up a room. I was the guy who fixed your printer and knew how to make killer ribs. We had our daughter, Maya, a few years later, and from the minute she was born, she became my universe. I wasn't the perfect dad, hell, who is? But I showed up, every recital, every fever, every apartment move and panic attack before finals I was there. I held down a boring but steady job in cybersecurity for over 2 decades. Not because I loved it, but because somebody had to keep the bills paid. Tessa stayed home, started a little candle business that eventually turned into a Facebook group of quotes, gossip, and vague empowerment slogans. From the outside, we were the cliché, house in the suburbs, 2 sedans, a golden retriever named Rocket. Picture perfect. But inside, little cracks kept forming. It started with interruptions. I'd be mid-sentence and Tessa would cut me off like I wasn't even there. At first, I laughed it off. She's just animated, I told myself. Then came the little digs. If I napped after work, must be nice to rest after doing the bare minimum. Forget to grab eggs? You had one job, Dan. All said in that cheerful, joking voice that made me feel like I was the sensitive one if I got upset. Even Maya, my sweet girl, started tuning me out. If I offered advice, she'd roll her eyes and later repeat the same thing I said, just louder. And suddenly, it was brilliant. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. I just felt invisible. So when my 51 birthday rolled around, I didn't expect fireworks. A steak dinner maybe. A quiet night. Something that made me feel seen. Instead, they threw a surprise party. Our backyard was packed Tessa's candle circle, Maya's college friends, even my brother Eli, who only shows up if there's free booze. They had streamers, a big happy 5-2 banner, and the grill already fired up. Guess who was in charge of cooking? Yup, me. No one asked. No one said, "Hey Dan, do you want to relax tonight?" They just handed me tongs and expected me to get to work. And I did, because that's what I always did. Then, mid-party, Maya walks up holding a cardboard crown, a cheap Burger King knockoff. Red glitter, big block letters, King of Letdowns. They all laughed. Tessa clapped like it was the cleverest thing she'd ever seen. Eli leaned over, grinning, cold-blooded man. But hey, kind of fits, doesn't it? I laughed too. That short, choked laugh you make when your stomach's twisting into knots but you don't want to cause a scene. Then I went back to grilling. Later, they had me take pictures. Dad, get one of all of us! Make sure everyone fits! I wasn't in a single photo. Not one! Just the guy behind the lens. When it came time for cake, someone shouted, "Make a wish. Danny boy, wish for a personality." More laughter, more smiles. That night, after everyone left, I was still cleaning up. Tessa was on the couch, phone in hand, drink half finished. I asked her, "Hey, did you really think that crown was funny?" She didn't even glance up. Just said, "It was a joke, Dan. You've been so sensitive lately." That was the moment. Not a scream, not a slam of a door, just silence. And a blinking cursor on a travel site I hadn't visited in years. I didn't know where I was going, just that I was going. I booked a one-way flight to a small coastal town in Washington. I remembered from a tech conference, quiet, green, and home to the best cherry pie I'd ever tasted. I packed light. Some clothes, my laptop, a few old journals, and Rocket. Yup, I took the dog. Nobody noticed he was missing until I was long gone. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Nothing dramatic. Just, I need to go. I don't think I've ever really been happy. Take care of yourselves, Daniel. A week later, I saw Maya's post on Instagram. A photo from her high school graduation, one of the rare times I was actually in the frame, with a caption that read, "If anyone sees my dad, tell him we're sorry. We didn't know. We just want him home." The comments poured in. "He always seemed so nice. You never know what someone's going through." Eli wrote, "Miss you, bro. Hope you're okay." The same guy who laughed the hardest at that party. I didn't reply, not because I didn't care, but because it wasn't time yet. See, what they didn't know was that I wasn't just running away. I was starting something none of them saw coming. I landed in Gray Shore, Washington on a foggy Tuesday morning, a town so small you could drive through it before your podcast intro finished. I picked it because no one knew me here, no expectations, no labels, just fresh air, trees that whispered when the wind passed through, and a little diner on Main Street that still made cherry pie from scratch. I rented a studio above a secondhand bookstore. The landlord, Gary, was an ex-Navy mechanic who looked like he'd fought 2 wars and 1 divorce. When I told him I needed a place fast and offered 3 months' rent in cash, he nodded once and handed me the keys. "Quiet's easy to find here," he said. "But peace? That's earned." Rocket sniffed the corners like he was claiming them for both of us. I sat on the lumpy futon that doubled as a bed and stared at the dusty window. No noise. No birthday parties. Just me, the dog, and the sound of nothing. I started building a routine. Morning walks with Rocket through the coastal trail. Strong coffee brewed in a chipped mug. A little writing. A lot of silence. I didn't even realize how much noise I'd been living with until I wasn't drowning in it anymore. At first, I just wrote to unload. Years of words, I never said things that got buried under fake smiles and passive-aggressive comments. I filled one notebook, then another. The writing turned sharp, focused, not just venting, but documenting. I listed everything I'd done for that family, the tuition payments I made, the roof I patched myself, the time I took off work to drive Maya to therapy because Tessa was too drained, every favor, every compromise. I stapled receipts to pages, added email printouts, even transcribed old text messages. It wasn't revenge, not at first. It was recognition, proof that I'd existed in that house. Then I remembered something Eli said at the party, between gulps of beer. "You gotta admit, man, you're kinda a doormat." I laughed at the time, but now I wasn't laughing, so I made a decision. It started with a phone call to our financial advisor, Leo, a nice guy who used to call me the quiet one. "Leo," I said, "I need you to pull my name from every joint account. Everything. I want a separate portfolio under just me." He paused. "Daniel, is everything okay?" "Not really. But it will be." Then came the utilities, the mortgage, the car insurance. I'd been handling it all for so long that Tessa didn't even know how to log into the accounts. I stopped the autopay, froze the cards, transferred everything tied to my name. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I was just stepping back, letting the chips fall where they always would have if I hadn't been the one holding everything together with duct tape and late nights. 3 days later, my old phone, still powered on but tucked in a drawer, buzzed so hard it fell off the nightstand. 21 missed calls, 2 voicemails from Tessa, 1 from Eli, and 1 from Maya. I didn't listen to any of them. I blocked the numbers. Not because I was angry, but because I knew what they were going to say. "Come back. Let's talk." We didn't mean it. But meaning it or not didn't change what was real. And then, like clockwork, the public post dropped. Tessa, queen of cryptic martyrdom, wrote on Facebook, "When someone walks out on their family instead of facing hard conversations, that says more about them than us." Cue the comments from her circle of wine moms and MLM loyalists. "You're so strong, Tessa." He always seemed distant. God gives his toughest battles to his strongest warriors. But what stood out weren't the loud voices. It was the quiet ones. An old coworker commented, "I always thought Dan carried more than people realized." A neighbor added, "I saw what happened at the birthday party. That crown wasn't a joke, it was cruel." She deleted the post within hours. Too late. The unraveling had begun. Eli couldn't get approved for a loan. I had stopped co-signing anything years ago, but he never noticed because I still bailed him out behind the scenes. Maya's car payments? They bounced. The joint account she never contributed to was no longer her safety net. Then came the email. Subject line, please don't delete this. It was from Maya. She wrote that at first. She didn't understand why I left, that the party was just fun, that the crown wasn't meant to hurt. But now, she said, things were falling apart at home. Jeff was crashing at the house. Tessa was crying daily, blaming me for everything from the bills to the thermostat. Maya wrote, "You were always the calm one, the fixer. I didn't realize how much you held together until it all started breaking. I read it 3 times, then saved it. Didn't reply. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I felt too much. Instead, I went back to my files. My plan wasn't slashing tires or draining accounts. It was something better, cleaner, letting reality hit, letting the truth surface. The kind of truth you couldn't talk your way out of. The kind that lived in bank statements and email chains. The kind that didn't need yelling to be heard. I contacted a lawyer. His name was Mark Easton. Quiet, methodical, with glasses that always slid down his nose. When I showed up with a folder thicker than a Bible, he raised one brow and said, "You've been planning this?" I shook my head. "I've just been paying attention. We started building the case. Not for court, necessarily, but for clarity." Mark said something I didn't expect. "This isn't about revenge, Daniel. This is about reclaiming your time." I liked that. Meanwhile, Tessa finally realized the mortgage hadn't been paid. The utilities were overdue. She called Maya in tears, who called Eli, who of course blamed me. They thought I had broken the family. They didn't realize I'd just stopped pretending it was whole. Then, one rainy morning, Maya left a voicemail. I hadn't spoken to her since I left. Her voice was soft, different, like she wasn't wearing the mask anymore. "Dad, I think I'm starting to get it. I don't feel safe in that house. Jeff drinks all the time. Mom's overwhelmed. It's like we're all falling apart without you. I used to think you were just there, like part of the furniture. But now I see. You were the glue." That message broke something in me, but not in a bad way. It broke the last bit of guilt I was carrying, because someone finally saw me. I played Maya's voicemail twice that night. Her voice didn't sound like the girl who used to roll her eyes when I asked how her classes were going. It didn't sound like the version of her that used to say things like, "Dad, you worry too much," or "Stop being dramatic." This time, it was different, honest, like she'd dropped the performance. And maybe that's what got to me most. Not the apology, not the tears, but the fact that for once she wasn't trying to fix anything. She was just telling the truth. Still, I didn't call her back. Instead, I typed out a short reply. "I heard your message. I'm okay. I'm not ready to come back, but I'm listening." I hit send before I could second guess it. No emoji. No punctuation beyond what was needed. Just plain words. But it was the most I'd said to her in weeks. That night, I walked Rocket down to the water. The rain had finally cleared, and the air had that cold snap that makes everything feel sharper. I stood there, looking out at the fog curling over the surface like breath. And for the first time in a long while, I felt still, not numb, not angry, just still. Back at the studio, I kept working with Mark. Every call, every document we added to the file, I felt lighter. Not because I wanted to win, but because I wanted the truth to breathe. Tessa's lawyer sent over papers. She wanted to file for separation, claimed emotional abandonment, asked for spousal support, said she'd sacrificed her career to raise our daughter. I stared at the page, then laughed. Out loud, the kind of laugh that doesn't carry joy, just disbelief. Because I had the records, the bank statements, the tax returns, the receipts. I'd paid every bill since Maya was in diapers, covered every emergency, co-signed every loan. Tessa's career? That was a Facebook group and a dozen mason jars filled with wax in the garage. I sent everything to Mark. He said, "This case isn't complicated, it's just loud." While we waited for the court date, the real fallout began. Maya messaged me again a few days later. This time, she didn't ask if I was coming back. She asked if she could visit. I won't bring anything. Not even questions. "I just want to see you." I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I told her where I was. A week later, she showed up. No warning, just a knock at the door one Saturday afternoon. I'd been fixing a busted toaster for Jerry, and Rocket barked before I even heard the steps. When I opened the door, there she was hood up, sneakers soaked, standing in the drizzle with a reusable grocery bag slung over one shoulder. She looked smaller, like life had wrung something out of her. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I replied. Rocket pushed past me, tail wagging like he was greeting royalty. She crouched down and scratched behind his ears. "He remembers," she said. "He never forgot," I said quietly. We didn't hug. Not yet. I stepped aside and let her in. We sat in silence for a while. I poured her coffee. Black, no sugar. Same as me. That surprised us both. She looked around the studio, stacked books, notebooks, old radio parts, the quilt on the futon. "This place feels more like home than our house ever did," she said. She didn't say it to hurt me, just to tell the truth. She pulled out a plastic container from her bag. "Cherry pie. From the diner. My favorite," I figured. "You might still like it," she said. I smiled. "Still do." She stayed a couple hours. We didn't talk about court, or money, or Tessa. We just talked. About her job, her friends, her plans. And at one point, she said something I didn't expect. "I think I started turning into her," she said. I looked at her but said nothing. I'd hear her talk about you, and I'd just agree, like it was easier. But now she's panicking, crying every day. Not because she misses you, but because she doesn't know how to pay the internet bill or reset the router. That one made me laugh. Maya smiled too. "You always made things look easy. Turns out they were just invisible." She stood to leave just before sunset. At the door, she looked back. "I hope I earn a second chance. Not as your daughter, but as someone you can trust again." I nodded. "We'll see." After she left, I sat on the porch with Rocket and finished the pie straight from the container. It wasn't about the sweetness. It was about the fact that she remembered. "That night," Mark called. "Tessa's lawyer wants mediation," he said. "Because? She's losing ground, financially, publicly. Her story's starting to fall apart." I told him I'd think about it. Then I opened my laptop and I wrote. Not just the facts this time, but the feelings. The years I spent trying to be everything, the resentment I swallowed, the way I laughed at my own humiliation to keep the peace. I wrote it all down, and then, for the first time, I sent a copy to Maya. Not as a guilt trip, as proof of who I was, of what I gave. The next day, she replied, "I read every word, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. But I see it now. We didn't talk again for a few days after that. But it was enough." Tessa, meanwhile, was unraveling publicly. She posted vague quotes about betrayal, about strength, about being abandoned. But the comments this time were different. People weren't buying it anymore. An old friend of mine commented, "Funny how people suddenly become saints once they're gone." A former neighbor added, "You know, I used to wonder how Dan stayed so patient. Now I just wonder how long he lasted." She deleted the post an hour later, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about gravity, about what happens when you remove the thing holding everything up. People assumed I exploded, that I walked out in rage, but I didn't. I just stopped standing in the fire. The day the court date was set, I didn't feel fear, not even anger, just a calm I couldn't quite explain. Mark handed me a folder thick with printed emails, bank statements, photos, and receipts. Everything I'd spent years trying to make invisible now printed in bold black ink. "This is more than enough," he said, tapping the folder. "She built a story on air. You've got stone." I nodded, but I wasn't thinking about court. I was thinking about the moment I stopped trying to be everything for everyone and how life didn't fall apart. It got clearer. Maya came by again the week before the hearing. This time, no pie, just her. Hoodie pulled tight against the rain, hands buried deep in her sleeves. "I'm not here to make things weird," she said. I needed to get out of that house. I didn't ask questions, I just made coffee. She sat on the same spot as before, pulling her legs up under her like she used to when she was little and scared of thunder. "She's trying to sell the house," she said quietly, "but she can't. Not without your signature." I sipped my coffee. "That's not surprising. She blames you. Says you're punishing her." I waited a moment before replying. She called it a joke. That crown, that party, the pictures I wasn't in. If this is punishment, it's just me stepping aside. Maya didn't respond right away. Then Jeff's been sleeping on the couch. They fight constantly. He drinks more than he talks. I can't even stay there at night without headphones. I looked at her, not with judgment, just honesty. I didn't break that house, Maya. I just stopped fixing it. She flinched, but didn't argue. Later, as she got ready to leave, she said, I don't want to choose sides, but I also don't want to pretend nothing happened. I nodded. That's all I ever wanted. When I showed up at the courthouse, I wore the same suit I wore to Maya's college graduation. It still fit. Still smelled faintly like wood smoke and old cologne. Tessa was already inside. She wore black. Not elegant black. Funeral black. Her makeup soft, like she was going for tragic widow of a living man. Her lawyer sat beside her, flipping through papers like they were prepping for battle. Mark leaned in. We'll let the evidence speak. Don't engage emotionally. I didn't plan to. The judge, a silver-haired woman with a voice that could slice butter, called the room to order. Tessa's lawyer went first. He painted me like a ghost, an absent husband who walked out without explanation, leaving a fragile wife and a daughter emotionally stranded. He listed sacrifices Tessa had made, said she put her life on hold to raise our child, said I abandoned my responsibilities. Tessa dabbed at her eyes, like the words hurt to hear, but I kept my face still. No reaction. Then it was our turn. Mark stood up slow and steady and began pulling threads. He laid out the timeline. Every mortgage payment, every grocery bill, every school loan, every utility in my name. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He showed text messages, emails, bank transactions. He even submitted a photo of the King of Letdowns crown. It sat at the top of a page labeled Pattern of Emotional Minimization. The room went silent when Mark read the caption from Tessa's Facebook post aloud. When someone walks out on their family instead of talking like an adult, that says more about them than us. He paused, then said, My client did talk, just not with words. He spoke with action, with consistency, with decades of showing up silently while being ignored. Even the court reporter blinked. Tessa's lawyer tried to object, said the crown was just a gag. Mark turned to the judge. A gag that no one laughed at harder than the ones who made it. But not him. He cooked for them, cleaned for them, took their pictures, and wasn't in a single one. The judge didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. By the time we left the courtroom, the verdict wasn't official, but it was written all over the walls. A week later, the ruling came in. Tessa's request for spousal support, denied. Claim of emotional abandonment, rejected. The house, to be sold with the majority of the proceeds going to me due to proven financial contribution. And Jeff? He was ordered to repay $19,000 in debts I had quietly taken on to bail him out over the years. I didn't expect to see a dime, but it wasn't about that. It was about the record. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined the weight I carried. Tessa called me the day after the ruling. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. It was short, shaky. You made me look like a monster. No, I didn't. She just took the costume off herself. Maya came by again that weekend. She brought sandwiches from a deli downtown and asked if I'd help her learn how to budget. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was real. She sat with a notepad asking questions, listening. No eye rolls, no deflection, just presence. At one point, she looked up and said, It's weird, but I feel like I'm meeting you for the first time. I smiled. You're not. You're just seeing me without all the noise. As she packed up to leave, she asked, So, what now? I looked around the little studio. The books, the open windows, Rocket curled up at my feet. I think I just keep doing this, I said, living like my time matters. Later that evening, I stood on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun drag gold across the clouds. A thought crossed my mind, one I hadn't had since I left. What if I had stayed? What if I had just kept my head down, laughed at the jokes, cooked the meals, smiled for the pictures? Would I have been alive? Technically, yes, but spiritually, no, because surviving isn't the same as living, and I wasn't surviving anymore. I was beginning. After the court ruling, there was no celebration. No champagne, no fist pump, no dramatic monologue in the mirror, just silence and relief. I didn't feel like I'd won. Not really. It wasn't that kind of story. This wasn't about taking something from Tessa. It was about finally letting go of what never belonged to me in the first place. I was tired of carrying things no one even knew I was holding. So I let it all down. And then I started asking the question that terrified me more than anything else. What do I want now? Turns out, when your life isn't built around everyone else's needs, it feels like standing in a room full of mirrors. There's no one left to point at, just you. At first, I drifted. I fixed up broken radios for the antique shop downstairs, helped Gary rewire the bookstore's old cash register, walked Rocket twice a day through the back trails behind the diner. Simple things, quiet things. For the first time in decades, I woke up without dread sitting on my chest like a paperweight. There was no to-do list taped to the fridge. No voice shouting down the stairs about the Wi-Fi or the garage light. Just the hum of stillness, the soft breathing of the dog at my feet, and the scent of percolated coffee floating through the kitchen window. Maya kept visiting. Not every week, but enough. She started bringing books, asked if I'd read them with her, not because she needed help, but because she wanted to share something. We traded titles, swapped pages, argued over endings. It was new. Not perfect. Not easy. But real. One day, she showed up with a printed photo. It was the one from her graduation me in the background, half blurred, almost cut out of the frame. I printed it, she said. Not because it's a good photo, but because I realized it's the only one where you were there and I didn't see it at the time. She held it like it weighed something. I took it, stared at it a moment, then placed it on the bookshelf near the window. You weren't invisible, she said softly. I just didn't know how to look. That hit different. Not like a punch, more like sunlight on a wound. Around the same time, Tessa sent one last email. The subject line was blank. The body said, "You got what you wanted. Hope it was worth it." I didn't reply, because she still didn't understand. I didn't leave to win. I left to breathe. A few weeks later, Jerry offered me more hours at the shop. Said people had been asking for help with their old electronics. Radios, record players, even a vintage arcade machine someone found in a storage unit. It ain't glamorous, he said, wiping grease off his hands. But it's honest. I told him I'd think about it. Not because I didn't want it, but because I finally had the freedom to choose. There's a quiet power in that. Doing something not because you have to, but because it feels right. Spring came late in Grayshore. Rain clung to the rooftops like moss, and the mornings were still cold enough to see your breath. But something in me was thawing. I started writing again. Not the documents. Not the court prep. Real writing. Stories. Memories. Even a few pieces about men like me who spent so long trying to be strong that they forgot how to feel. I didn't share them, not yet. But they were there, waiting. Like seedlings under frost, Maya Reed one. Said it reminded her of someone she used to know but never fully understood. I smiled, because that someone was me. One Sunday morning, we sat on the porch drinking coffee. She had her shoes off, toes curled against the old wood. Rocket dozed in the shade. I'm thinking about moving, she said suddenly. Where? Closer. Maybe even Grayshore. There's a job opening at the community center. I raised an eyebrow. You sure? This place is quiet. Not much going on unless you like books, pie, and people who wave at stop signs. She laughed. That's kind of the point. There was a pause. Then she said, being around you now, it feels like breathing fresh air after living on fumes. That one stayed with me. I didn't respond, just let the wind carry it wherever it needed to go. The next day, I picked up the old camera I used to carry everywhere before marriage, before bills, before the roles and expectations. It still worked. I started taking photos again. Sunlight on wet pavement. A crow sitting on a broken fence post. Maya, laughing mid-sentence, half covered in wind-blown hair. Rocket chasing shadows on the trail. I'd forgotten how good it felt to see the world again, not just get through it. I started putting the photos up in the shop's back hallway. Jerry said it made the place look less like a dungeon. Customers started asking about them. One woman offered to buy a photo of a seagull perched on a mailbox. I didn't sell it, but I thanked her, because it reminded me that I had something to offer. Not just function, but beauty. One night, Maya asked me something. Do you miss her? I knew what she meant. Tessa. I thought for a while before answering. I don't miss who she became, I said. But I do miss the version of her that believed in me. Before everything got loud, Maya nodded. I think she misses that version of herself too. We both sat with that. Then she said, Do you think you'll ever fall in love again? I laughed softly. With a person? Maybe. But right now, I'm just learning how to fall in love with my life. And it was true. For the first time in half a lifetime, I wasn't being pulled toward or away from someone. I wasn't reacting. I was choosing how I spent my days, who I let in, when I rested, when I worked, when I simply sat still and let the world move around me without needing to fix it. The silence didn't scare me anymore. It comforted me. It reminded me that peace isn't the absence of chaos. It's the presence of self. It's funny how healing doesn't arrive like a sunrise. There's no grand light show, no trumpet call, no moment when everything suddenly feels okay. It shows up in pieces. Like waking up and realizing your first thought isn't about pain, or walking past a mirror and not flinching, or smiling because you want to, not because someone else expects you to. That's what the months after the court ruling felt like. A quiet unfolding. A long exhale I didn't know. I'd been holding for most of my life. Maya got the job. The community center in Grayshore was small, more like a glorified rec room with mismatched chairs and faded flyers on the wall, but they welcomed her with open arms. She started teaching digital literacy to seniors, helped organize weekend food drives, built a newsletter that didn't look like it came from 1997. She moved into a studio 2 blocks from mine, close, but not too close. We got into a rhythm, Sunday morning walks, occasional dinners, movie nights with old westerns and too much popcorn, and slowly we stopped circling around the past. Not because it stopped mattering, but because we stopped letting it define us. One evening, we sat by the coast. Same bench as the day I arrived. Only this time, there was no weight in my chest. Just a cup of diner coffee. Rocket curled up between us, and the smell of salt and pine. Maya was quiet for a long time before she finally spoke. I think I used to believe strength looked like never breaking, like always showing up, never making anyone uncomfortable. She turned to me. You did that. For years, and we called it love. But it wasn't love. It was martyrdom. I nodded. You don't get medals for losing yourself, I said. Just bruises. We sat with that truth. Let it settle. Then she said something I'll never forget. But you taught me something better. That real love doesn't ask someone to shrink. It invites them to take up space. A few weeks later, I got a letter from Tessa, handwritten, folded neatly in a plain envelope. No return address, just my name and the bookstore's P.O. box. I opened it on the back porch, sun low in the sky, Rocket's head resting on my foot like an anchor. It was short, not dramatic, not manipulative, just human. I don't expect forgiveness. I barely understand what happened, even now, but I've started going to therapy, alone, for once. No group slogans, no Bible verses. I don't live by just one woman, a chair, and a lot of silence I can't fill with blame. I don't know if I'll ever be the woman you married again, or if she ever really existed outside the version you built of her. But I see the damage now. I see you. And I'm sorry, I read it twice. Didn't cry, didn't get angry. Just folded it neatly and slid it into the drawer next to my journals. Because closure doesn't always mean doors slammed shut. Sometimes it means knowing you don't need to open them again. That summer, I started selling my photos. Jerry helped me set up a little online store. Nothing flashy, just prints. Black and white shots of trees, trails, dogs, windows, and rain. To my surprise, people bought them. Some wrote messages. This looks like how my heart feels. I've never been to this place, but I know it. It meant something. To them. To me. Because for years, I was the one behind the camera, never in the shot. Now my work was finally being seen, and not just as proof of someone else's memories, but as art, as presence. One afternoon, Maya showed up with a question. She stood in my kitchen, holding her phone like it might explode. Would you speak at a workshop? She asked. A workshop? For the center? About starting over. About men and mental health. About, I raised an eyebrow. You want me to be inspirational? She grinned. Not inspirational, just honest. I told her I'd think about it. And I did, for days. Then I said yes, not because I had all the answers, but because maybe someone else out there was sitting in their own boiling pot and didn't know it. Maybe they needed to hear what it sounded like when a man finally climbed out. So I spoke. One Thursday evening, in a folding chair beneath flickering fluorescent lights, I told my story. Not the court version, the real version, about the slow loss of identity, the buried resentment, the laughing through insults because it was easier than confrontation. I talked about disappearing and coming back to myself. When I finished, nobody clapped. They just sat there, silent, listening. And one man mid-50s, wedding band turned backward on his finger, stood up and said, "I thought I was the only one." He wasn't. None of us are. That's the lie that keeps us quiet. Now, life isn't perfect. The heater in the studio still groans in the morning. Rocket's getting older and snores louder than ever. I burn my toast more often than I should, but it's mine, the peace, the pace, the moments of stillness that I no longer feel guilty for enjoying. Some nights I sit on the porch and watch Maya walk home down the sidewalk, her shoulders relaxed, her face soft, and I think we made it. Not because we reversed everything, but because we decided we were worth the rebuilding. One evening, she asked me again, "Do you think you'll ever go back? To a family? A relationship? All of it?" I thought for a long moment, then said, "I don't think I need to go back to anything. I think I'm already somewhere better." She nodded. "Yeah, I think I am too." We stood there for a while, watching the last of the sun dip behind the hills. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own life. I wasn't the background anymore. I wasn't the fixer or the forgotten. I was just me, Daniel, a man who walked away not to disappear, but to begin. And finally, I had. Story 2. Most people who knew me growing up would probably tell you that I was the lucky one. My name is Jake, and I am currently 27 years old. Straight A student, received full tuition, found a good tech job after graduation, and, perhaps most importantly, was the only member of the family who ever appeared to succeed. They don't mention that good fortune had a cost, and that cost was often my quiet. When my sister Carly was bailed out of her third DUI using my emergency money, I said nothing. When my parents borrowed my graduation funds to replace their roof and neglected to repay them, I kept silent. And I particularly kept quiet for years after I was adopted as the family ATM, posing as the mature kid who could take a bit more strain. That was the dynamic. I was the son who would arrive with bags of food without being asked, the fixer, the helper, and the one who would pay someone's medical bill without requesting wire transfers because the car broke down again. And it became guilt each time I questioned it. "Jake, you're simply in a better position. Your sister has had a difficult life, you know. Would you not allow us to suffer?" During Thanksgiving, I always persuaded myself that it was acceptable to act like the nice son and pretend to fly as my mom cried over the dry turkey and smiled, and my dad made the same 5 jokes about when you were going to settle down. I once believed it was worthwhile. I no longer do. I noticed a change as soon as I came in this past Thanksgiving. Jake wasn't there. You're present. Or a hug from mom that is too warm. Only lukewarm. "Hey, hello!" Charlie scolded me and hardly looked up from her phone as she cleaned her hands on a dish towel. I attributed it to stress. When money was tight and I took a bottle into the kitchen, they would always behave strange. It was then that I saw the family album on the coffee table. It had been years since that monster had appeared. It was hidden in a box in the attic with all those old, awkward kid pictures when I last saw it. Carly was missing her 2 front teeth, and I was wearing overalls. At Christmas, our parents appeared 20 years younger. I was shocked to see it again because it used to be a Christmas staple. Perhaps someone was experiencing nostalgia. While everyone was occupied with conversation and switching between football games, I picked it up and began flicking through the pages without any fanfare. The first few were fuzzy vacation photos, birthday photos, and lovely newborn photos. But as I continued, I became aware of something strange. All of the pictures that featured me were ripped. Not only ripped, chopped out, and sloppily, as though someone had looked at me in the photo and decided I didn't belong. I initially believed it may have been an accident. Perhaps some pages were damaged by water damage or were trapped. Carly's face, however, remained unharmed. She appeared in every picture, smiling, laughing, and taking center stage. I turned page after page, and each time my face was included in a photograph, it was torn out. My graduation from high school, just my parents and Carly grinning in front of a flag. Even though I was subsisting on instant noodles, I paid for that Christmas and gave gifts to everyone. I've finished my present pile, Carly alone, unwrapping gifts. I had a racing heart. I had a burning face. As I sat there, I watched as 27 years of evidence that I belonged to this family were destroyed, and nobody made any comment. I gently closed the album and replaced it in its original location. I said nothing at all. That night's dinner was the typical passive-aggressive marathon. Despite having requested me to bring store-bought rolls, Mom was critical of the ones I brought. Carly implied that her rent had increased while complaining about her work once more. Given that I had paid off his credit card debt last spring, Dad's casual remark about young people nowadays squandering money on avocado toast was funny. I grinned the entire time. I gave a nod. Their jokes made me chuckle, but something inside of me had broken. After dessert, when Carly was browsing TikTok like a teenager and Mom was fumbling with dishes, something had finally completely shattered. Silently, the first took out the envelope I had packed. It was easy. No label, white. It was placed on the dining table by me. What is this? Carly eyed it as if it would blow up and inquired. Calmly, it's not for here. Later, open it. That meant she opened it right away, of course. She took out the letter and began to read it. She seemed confused at first, then angry. Mom read it with shaking hands when she gave it to her. Observed as her gaze swept across the page. She opened her mouth slightly. As if she had been winded, she gripped her chest. Then she broke down in tears, not merely sniffling, weeping. The type of tears you shed when you see that something is shattered, not simply broken. My dad froze in the middle of pouring himself a drink. He gently read the letter that my mother had given him. Line by line, his hands began to tremble. He made a tiny, tight line with his lips, but remained silent. Nobody did. I left them there as well. Although the letter was brief and had been penned days earlier, it was packed with years of meaning. I had rewritten, erased, and re-examined it 100 times. Ultimately, however, it expressed precisely what was required. I informed them that I was done playing the role of scapegoat, the safety net, and the one who pretended that this family was based on love rather than deceit. I reminded them of all the times they had robbed me of my money, time, and thoughts, and how they had never returned anything but blame and expectations. I informed them. I had seen the record. It was the final insult I would take after witnessing what they had done. I clarified that I would no longer be paying Carly's rent, helping with Mom's auto maintenance, or paying for Dad's medical expenditures, that someone would have to figure it out, without my help, the next time they reached their lowest point. Finally, I informed them that I would not be returning, not for Christmas, not on birthdays, not for anything. I picked up my coat, looked at them one final time, and left the room as the quiet grew. However, that isn't even the most absurd aspect. For what followed? They didn't take it well, to put it mildly. The neighborhood was enveloped in a strange grayish dusk as the sun had already set by the time. I arrived at my car, everything appeared icy. I was unaffected by the false warmth that appeared to permeate even the homes with those cheery early Christmas lights. I briefly sat in the driver's seat with my fingers gripping the steering wheel and the engine off. I could feel the thumping of my heart in my throat. I had no idea what to anticipate. Perhaps yelling and guilt-tripping. The mother is rushing to the driveway. She begged me not to do this to the family instead, mascara running down her cheeks. Nothing. I did not follow out with a single word. Nothing but quiet. It nearly got worse because of that. There wasn't a sense of shock in the silence. It required computation, reprisal. Furthermore, I knew my family well enough to know that they would not tolerate this going unanswered. I returned by car to my Airbnb across town, a small one-bedroom apartment with a heater that hummed like a lawnmower and creaky floors. It was mine, even though it was ugly. After setting my bag aside, I sat on the bed and gazed at my phone. No messages. No calls were missed. An hour passed while I waited. Nothing has changed. It started the following day. It was subtle at first. Carly posted something ambiguous on Facebook when I woke up. When money is on the line, some people truly show their true selves. This was followed by a vague, motivational quote that made her feel like the one who was hurt. Your family should be your haven, not your battleground. Carly, classic, aggressive in a passive manner. Not specific enough to justify conflict, but public enough to elicit sympathy. Mom then joined in. She made a more dramatic post. A picture of her and Carly as babies in black and white, captioned, "I will always be proud of my girl, no matter what. Loyalty matters more than money." I didn't answer. I didn't even react. I knew they were hoping I'd take the bait that I jump into, defend myself, or try to explain. But this wasn't a conversation. This was performance art. But what I didn't expect was what came next. The phone calls to my friends. Some background. Back in high school, I had this tight-knit group of 3 friends, Ben, Marcus, and Lila. We'd stayed in touch over the years, met up when I was in town, shared group chats, and the occasional game night over Zoom. They knew my family was complicated, but I never really unloaded on them. I always felt like talking about it too much, made it real in a way I wasn't ready to admit. Apparently, my mom didn't feel the same hesitation. Marcus texted me first. "Hey man, weird question. Did something happen with your family? Your mom called me, said she's worried about you." Then Ben, yo, got a voicemail from your mom. Something about you being under stress and needing people around you. She okay? Even Layla, who hadn't talked to my mom in years, messaged me. Your mom found my number through an old directory from college. She said you're pushing everyone away and asked me to reach out. What's going on? It was bizarre. They were trying to conduct an intervention on me after cutting them off. The worst part was that I almost fell for it. A tiny voice in my brain started whispering, maybe you overreacted. Maybe they're simply wounded. Maybe this is all just a misunderstanding. But then I recalled the images, the way they didn't even flinch when I noticed the record. The way my existence had been wiped from family history, like a nuisance. They weren't injured. They were captured. Still, I felt nauseous. Not because I regretted anything, but because it reinforced something I'd been suppressing for a long time. Their son wasn't me. They invested in me. And I was being liquidated now that the returns had stopped coming in. Calmly, I explained the situation to my buddies in a group message. I refrained from venting. I didn't speak poorly of anyone. I just outlined it, point by point. The money, the guilt, the pictures, the letter, the years of manipulation, and how I was ultimately putting peace over duty. They all gave the same answers. Ben, that's dude, I have no words at all. You have my admiration. You're worthy of more than that circus. I'm very sorry you had to go through that, Layla. We appreciate you confiding in us enough to let us know what you need. Marcus, I've got your back. Families should be there to love you, not to take advantage of you. You made the correct decision. Really? It ought to have ended there. However, it wasn't, because my supervisor called me 2 days later. I now work for a mid-sized firm from home. Even though I've always kept business and family totally apart, my mom managed to get in somehow. She apparently requested to speak with HR over the phone at the front desk of my firm, stated that she was concerned about her son's mental health and believed that they ought to be informed of certain risky conduct. I'll say it again. Since I was no longer able to support her lifestyle, my mother attempted to steal my career. Fortunately, my employer is a sensible man. He discussed the conversation with me in private, saying he thought something strange was happening and that I might want to deal with it directly. He even suggested that I take some paid time off if I wanted to decompress. I said no. I required the order, the routine, something to cling to while my whole family fell apart like a cheap card table. Even though we hadn't gotten in touch since I left, I blocked my mom's number and Carly's, and even my dad's that evening. I figured that could be the end of it, unless you count like Carly's petty Facebook post. I was mistaken because a few days later, instead of an email or text, I received a letter in the mail. A real letter, written by hand, no address for return. There was only 1 page of paper inside. No sign-off, no hello, just 4 words, all capitalized. We are owed everything by you. Suddenly, the game was different. I held the letter like it may catch fire in my hands as I sat at my small Airbnb kitchen table. The paper shook slightly, not because of a strong wind or anything, but more because my fingers were trembling. Fear wasn't the reason, not quite. Something more surgical, something colder. Similar to the sensation you get just before applying pressure to a wound that needs sutures. For a long time, I gazed at those 4 words. We are owed everything by you. Everything. I don't appreciate all that you've done. Now, please, let's have a conversation. Not even. How did you know? As if I were property? As if they were pursuing a debt? I knew then that I was no longer striving for respect. I was only attempting to get out of a contract that I never signed. I let the envelope fall to the table and leaned back. I experienced an odd sense of tranquility, the type that comes just after you give up on the idea that things will return to their previous state. At last, that small part of me, the child who still thought his parents loved him without conditions, let go of the ghost. And when it happened, my perspective changed. Sharper. Similar to an engineer disassembling a malfunctioning circuit. What had I done incorrectly? The system was where? Broken. I took out my laptop that evening and began gathering all of the information. Not yet, not for retaliation, just some clarification. I reviewed the last 6 years' worth of bank statements. Callie receives every wire transfer, utility bills, and every payment I make to my folks. All the loans that were never paid back. My stomach twisted at the total. It was a lot, I knew, but this. Nearly 6 figures were involved. Pay the rent, bailouts from credit cards, down payments, auto repairs, Carly's child's tuition at a private school, even food. And there was never a thank you for any of it. Only an anticipation. I included text screenshots. Things like, "You wouldn't leave us struggling, would you?" were spoken by my mother. Alternatively, "You do not want Carly to be evicted," the ones to which I replied yes. Even when I was barely making ends meet on ramen, then I discovered something I had completely forgotten. A recording was made. Only the audio from 3 months prior, when I had unintentionally hit the record button while visiting for my dad's birthday, was automatically saved to my phone. I left for a minute, and it captured their chat. Although I had attributed the uncomfortable visit to overall dysfunction, I did recall it. It was something different from what I heard on the recording. I was supposed to be outdoors when my mother began speaking to Carly in the kitchen. "We must keep him with us, will we? Avoid upsetting him. Not until the mortgage is paid off. He is free to do as he pleases when the refinancing is approved. Carly, he's retreating already. He requested the automobile things receipts. Mom, fix him then. Are you able to accomplish that? He's too busy giggling to check on Dad. He refuses to leave. He's overly lenient. It has always been." Listening to strangers was like that. Similar to a family. I had only dreamed of it. They didn't sound in the least bit conflicted. They were planning something, making plans, as if I were a commercial transaction or an armed checkbook. I hit the stop button. The last nail in the coffin was that. The calls, the letter, and the quiet. The melodramatic Facebook. They were signs. This recording, the illness was this. I didn't act, though, not quite yet. I wanted to be believed. I wanted to congratulate them and send them a copy with all my might. In a huge typeface, you portrayed yourselves. However, this would not be another emotional breakdown. They would anticipate that. No. Really put an end to this if I was going to. I needed to be as strategic and patient as they had been. So I waited. I never answered the letter. I didn't make any posts. I didn't even discuss it with my buddies. Things are still strange when they go beyond the simple. I wanted them to believe that I was offended and perhaps even regret it. When individuals like my family believe you're vulnerable once more, that's when they become brave. And I was correct. My mother sent me an email 3 days later. No topic line. Only one phrase. "If you don't become too emotional, you can still remedy this." A scanned copy of the letter was included. It came from an attorney. Hers? It seems that they were looking at their legal possibilities in relation to unmet family duties, and they would have to think about the repercussions if I didn't stand behind Carly throughout her custody battle. I gazed at it, numb. For failing to defend my adult sister in court, they threatened to sue me. I had no idea what to do with that at all. For what reason were they intending to sue me, not covering her attorney's fees, not providing her with emotional support throughout her custody dispute with a man she had dated for 3 weeks? I nearly laughed at first. The ridiculousness was too much. However, it began to burn more the longer I sat with it, because they were attempting to penalize me for stepping back to teach me a lesson, even if it was unfounded and never made it to a trial. I knew then that I had been thinking too narrowly. A lesson was what they want. All right. I would offer them a memorable one. I became silent on the outside for the following 2 weeks. I kept my cool. No irate emails, no hurried replies, no dramatic postings. Nothing but quiet. On the inside, though, I was getting ready. I first got a lawyer, not because I believed their case to be legitimate. I wanted to be protected, so they didn't. I discovered a modest but astute lawyer who focused on harassment and family law disputes. He smirked and remarked, "This won't hold water, but let's hit back harder." After one meeting and a glance at the fictitious legal threat, I then collected all of the receipts. The emails, messages, wire transfers, and even the recording. Family exploitation evidence is the name of the tidy digital file I created out of them. It had more than 80 pages. I handed it to my attorney, who assisted me in writing a letter of stop and desist that mentioned financial exploitation, emotional pain, and harassment. We didn't merely tell them to stop. We made it plain, informally, that any more attempts to get in touch with me, put financial pressure on me, or publicly disparage me would be met with a civil lawsuit. We had even estimated the total amount they had stolen throughout the years. The amount was 6 digits. I mailed the letter after that. They each demanded a certified return receipt. Mom? Dad? Carly? I didn't stop there, though. Do you recall how my mother had gotten in touch with my employer? A big line had been crossed by that call. I thus had my lawyer file a formal complaint with her employer's Human Resources Department. She had a part-time job at a nearby clinic. It wasn't malevolent. It was true. I described the circumstances, provided proof to support it, and explained how her unfounded statements to my employer had resulted in needless stress at work. I didn't request that she be fired. All I wanted was for them to know about her actions. However, I was familiar with little towns. Word would get out. The last step followed. I approached my extended family members, whom I had always kept at a distance since I didn't want to share personal details, one by one. The sister of my mother, a cousin of my dad, even the closest friend of my late grandma, who had always written me a handwritten letter. I didn't send them a dramatic tell-all or a manifesto, just a straightforward statement. Just so you know, Mom and Carly's side has been really dramatic. For the sake of my mental health, I'm separating from the family. Feel free to contact me personally if you hear something crazy. While some answered, others ignored me, and they were astounded when I revealed a little more. That explains why your mom has been making up this whole story about you being ungrateful. One person even stated. It sounded precisely right to me. It was a gradual but delicious fallout. Carly posted additional cryptic phrases and passive-aggressive jabs in an attempt to elicit compassion online. However, her custody battle began to unravel without me paying her rent or legal fees. Her former partner successfully sued for full custody. Although I felt bad about it, especially for her child, I also didn't feel bad about it. She had taken advantage of me despite my years of trying to assist. My father didn't get in touch. Not once. Perhaps he felt embarrassed. Perhaps he didn't give a damn. Silence was great with me, however. In contrast, my mother did not give up lightly. She stopped talking for a few days after receiving the cease and desist. She then addressed a handwritten note to my previous address, which was fortunate enough to be forwarded. It was 5 pages lengthy, defensive, rambling, and chock full of the typical guilt tricks. We're the only family you had. Everything was misinterpreted by you. We always have your best interests in mind. I've read it once. I fed it into the shredder after that. Since then, I have not spoken to them. It has now been around 6 months. I relocated to a different apartment. My own space. There are no family pictures on the wall, just tranquility. After years of putting off a trip, I finally made the reservation. Greece. In Santorini, I was standing on a cliff with a view of the ocean. considering how much of my life I had been burdened by other people, and I felt light for the first time. Not because I avenged myself. I stopped allowing those who didn't love me to conditionally define what I owed them. Not because I won. I had lost a lot to them. Time, cash, recollections. However, I was the one item I wouldn't let them retain. And I believe that was the true triumph. Story 3, Ryan is my name. I'm 28. Additionally, I've made every effort to stay quiet at family gatherings over the past few years. It's not like I despise my family or anything. Let's just say that a long time ago, I was informally known as the disappointment. My job isn't really glamorous. I don't have a spouse or children. In addition, unlike my cousins, I did not pursue careers in law or medicine. I usually work as a freelancer there, and I like living a tranquil life. However, my Aunt Linda, who is unquestionably the queen of family image, believes that silence equates to failure. I simply nodded and smiled as she murmured, "Try not to embarrass us tonight," as she leaned into my window that afternoon. After that, I switched off the engine, got out, went to the rear seat, and took the cake coolly. The stack of well-wrapped birthday presents I had purchased with my own funds had been specially ordered, and, most significantly, the key to the party space I had reserved weeks in advance. After that, I closed the door, got back in the car, and drove off. Aunt Linda's youngest and the family's golden child, my cousin Emily, was celebrating her 18th birthday with a party. Straight A's are athletic and almost usually well-groomed. The fact that Emily was really kind added complexity to the situation. She had asked me to help plan her birthday, not her mother. Stated that she wanted something casual rather than extravagant, something that reminded her of herself. She wasn't being paraded about like a debutante at another ball by Aunt Linda. I had discreetly taken charge, reserved a location by the lake, purchased her favorite cake from a nearby bakery, placed orders for presents I knew she would adore, and even printed out small Polaroids from her early years to display about the space. It was meant to be a lovely, uncomplicated evening. The problem with Aunt Linda, though, is that she is the only subject of any discussion. She also pretended to chuckle when I informed her last week that Emily preferred a low-key approach, saying, "Oh, Ryan, you don't have to cover for her shyness. What I have prepared will be adored by her." I should have resisted more, but I was accustomed to getting steamrolled by this time. Until the morning of the party, when I received a call from a bewildered caterer inquiring about setup, I had no idea what I had planned. As it turned out, Aunt Linda had also made arrangements for a DJ, a photographer, and a party planner to come to a completely other location, a posh banquet hall halfway across town. She didn't know. I had already covered the lakeside venues deposit. Or perhaps she did and didn't give a damn. She responded with a thumbs-up emoji when I contacted her to inquire what was happening. "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." A smiley face was essentially a message telling a peasant to back off. Emily seemed unhappy, but not shocked, I informed her. She answered, "Just show up for the one you planned. It's okay if it's just the two of us. All I want is to be among people who understand me." Was that the plan then? Until I arrived outside Aunt Linda's house to assist with transportation, that is, because I'm an idiot who still believed that there could be a chance to save things. She gave me her squeeze grin, leaned in through the window in her gold-accented cardigan, and said, "Try not to embarrass us tonight by acting like I was the help." The preparation, the money, and the effort were all in vain, just like everything else I had done up to that moment. The final straw was that. My mother texted me to inquire where I was as I was driving out with the cake, the presents, and the key to the actual location. I didn't respond. I just drove to the location by the lake, unlocked the venue, and organized everything as Emily and I had discussed. Photo wall, soft lighting, her selection of favorite songs, background humming, a table full of little individualized gift bags. I had spent the entire night creating the stunning dessert. The words 18 years of awesome are written in loopy calligraphy on a vanilla background with strawberry layers and delicate pastel frosting. I perched on the edge of one of the seats and waited after pouring myself a Coke. An hour went by after 30 minutes. Then I received Emily's SMS. They're all simply standing there. What took place? I felt sick to my stomach. I gave her a call. No response. I then gave my mother a call. The second ring caught her attention. "You're where?" she snarled, like if I had deserted a battleground. "Everyone is present. You're angry, and Emily is weeping." I took a deep breath. "I'm at the location. Emily's request." "Where?" She was obviously already shaken since she barked. "The Goldview Banquet Center is where everyone is." The gilded perspective was not what she desired. "I want something small," she remarked. "Weeks ago, I made the reservation. She requested that I do so." The line paused for a moment. "Well, a lengthy one. You didn't disclose your involvement to anyone, though. Did you have a comprehensive plan?" "No," I responded, becoming quieter. Not for Emily, but for herself, she had a plan. I ended the call. For several minutes, I gazed at my phone, observing the accumulation of unread messages, some of which were from relatives inquiring about my well-being. Uncle James's question about if I was attempting another prank. Finally, there was a note from Emily. "Could I visit your home?" I texted her the actual venue's address. She entered the room 15 minutes later. She had smeared makeup. It appeared as though she was wearing a rigid outfit straight out of a fashion magazine shoot. It's not her style. She removed her heels and put on a pair of Converse sneakers that she wore behind her back. After surveying the room, she simply stood there in silence, indulging in the Polaroids, the music, the lights, and the dessert. Everywhere she looked was a reflection of her real upbringing and interests. She said, "This is fantastic." I gave a nod. I had a constricted throat. Her eyes were suddenly filled with tears, something I had never seen her do before. "My mom is going to be upset," she added. I chuckled. "Yes," I said. The night wasn't done, I thought. By no means. Since Aunt Linda was lighting matches in her head and the rest of the family was back at the Goldview, Emily was with me barefoot and eating cake under the faint glow of string lights, and I knew it was only a matter of time until the fire reached us. Indeed, 5 minutes later, the first spark appeared. An automobile quickly drew up, then another. Aunt Linda was getting out with her phone put to her ear when I looked out the window. I look around the place like a hawk. Beside me, Emily froze. She tracked me down. She muttered. I got to my feet. Even though I knew this would get messy, I had no regrets. Not quite yet. Not until my mom, my uncle, and a few other family members arrived, dragging their feet after Aunt Linda, who entered the room with a storm in her face that could tear a person to pieces. They all had that expression. The one who spoke, "How dare you cause a commotion?" despite the fact that I hadn't yet made any. The entire evening altered when Aunt Linda spoke. She didn't scream in the beginning. It was simply too simple. It's too clear. Aunt Linda tended to be a slow-ball dictator, the sort that had a toothy smile but no eye smile. She murmured in a voice like butter that had been left out too long as she entered, her immaculately manicured hands clasped in front of her clutch bag. "You're there!" I remained silent, just placed herself between Emily and her. "Have you been here before?" She turned to Emily and asked. "Slinking off to this at your own party." She glanced at the homemade banners as she scanned the room. The Polaroid of Emily on a bike or dressed as a carrot for Halloween, the side-ironed tablecloth. She hesitated for a moment at the images. She then immediately returned to her position. "Emily, you had visitors waiting, significant individuals. Your gym's sponsors. There was that Voyage Weekly photographer. They weren't invited," Emily remarked quietly. "Did you? And when the birthday girl vanished, what were they to believe?" Emily cast her gaze downward. She was getting smaller next to me. Before she could apologize, I moved onward. "On her own birthday," I responded. She didn't disappear. She simply attended the celebration. That was what she truly desired. Linda's jaw tightened as she cracked the mask slightly. "Please pardon me. This," I pointed around the space, "was always the plan." Emily expressed her desires to me. She was not interested in being a product launcher, Ryan whispered. She wanted a birthday from behind her Uncle James. "Not now. No," I said. "It's precisely that moment." She stopped smiling at that point. "You tiny self-righteous one." Linda Carter then dropped her voice once more. "Are you even aware of your actions?" "I received RSVPs from suppliers and Ryan contracts." "Indeed." A sushi bar was present. A live string quartet. Deposits have to be returned. A sushi bar was not what she wanted. I fired back. She requested images of herself with her cat and a chocolate cake with pink icing. That's all. That was her request. You weren't listening, though. In the rear, I could see my mother, wide-eyed and holding on to her pocketbook as if it were about to fly away. A couple of relatives stood clumsily close to the door. One of them had begun to shoot. Naturally, Emily moved ahead. Mom, I told you that I didn't want a big deal. Linda betrayed her. You weren't sincere when you stated that. You're a bashful person. It's all right if you don't always know what's best for you. I make the decisions for that reason. You make your own decisions, Emily remarked. She didn't back down, but her voice broke. That party was everything you wanted. The photographer was everything you wanted. You desired for everyone to see me in my ideal state. The subsequent quiet struck Linda like a blow to the head. She appeared to have been gut-punched, but she was making an effort to remain composed. She turned back to me after taking a trembling breath. This family has made you envious since you were a teenager. When we did anything properly, you just couldn't bear it. It was there. I had a million things I wanted to say. I didn't feel envious. I was worn out from being brushed aside, made fun of, and treated like a cautionary tale at every Thanksgiving dinner, because I was old enough to no longer think that everything would be miraculously resolved by college, that I had invested my own funds, effort, and emotions into constructing something tangible for Emily. She earned the attention not because I wanted it. However, I turned to face Emily instead. Still partially hidden in the entryway, she glanced back at me before turning to face the family-filled room. She said, "I'm staying here." "It's not you," Linda yelled. "We follow a timetable." "No," Emily answered. "You do." Now her voice was strong. "I'm 18. Do you recall? You told everyone you were an adult. You used 3 exclamation points when you put it online." My mother let out a gasp. When Linda stepped toward her, someone choked back a chuckle, but Emily went to my side, and it was the turning point. The locks click. In the sand, the line. The sensation was in my chest. When the underdog begins to push back, you get that tingling. Emily went on. "I tried to give you what you wanted. The clothing was mine." I grinned. "Even though I was polite, you managed to turn my birthday into a celebration of you." So, yes, I did go. And to be honest, I feel like I've been breathing for the first time in years. Linda stopped. She was trembling, with rage instead of grief, the type of rage that results from losing control of the story. "Do you believe that this is freedom?" She gave a hiss. "Delusion is what this is. Everything I made for you is being thrown away by you. Everything I gave up. For what purpose? For him." As though I were roadkill, she gestured at me. "Ryan paid attention," Emily said plainly. I can't say much more for anyone other than that. Once more, there was silence, sticky and thick. "Keep quiet." Above us, the humming of the string lights was nearly audible. Then Aunt Linda gave a quick little bark of laughter. "This is something you will regret. You too." Then she turned and bounded off. A couple of family members came next. Uncertain of which squad to join, her other remained still. My mother stayed a little while longer, then groaned and walked out, shaking her head and whispering something about family strife. Then we were alone once more. Emily, me, and a room filled with genuine, unvarnished, and flawed memories. She took a seat next to me. A forkful of cake was consumed. "She'll come after you hard." "Are you aware of that?" I gave a nod. "Are you prepared for that?" For the first time in years, I truly felt as though I may be when I looked at her. Now I am. However, I was unaware of the extent to which Aunt Linda would go to ensure that I felt remorse for every moment of it. Emily left shortly after that. "We might be able to complete a few pieces of cake in 30 minutes. She blew out the little sparkler candles I had hidden in case she videotaped it, smiling with icing on her nose, and then shared it on her story with the simple remark, "Real party." Play her favorite indie music on the speakers and light the candles. No stage postures, no filter. The venue felt too quiet with just her sitting cross-legged on the floor, wearing a sweatshirt she grabbed from my luggage after she departed, and mismatched socks. I painstakingly cleaned up, removing each Polaroids individually and re-putting them in the package. I chose to ignore the fact that my phone was blowing up again. Although I anticipated consequences, I didn't anticipate it to begin as quickly or as widely as it did. My email was packed when I came home. emails.dms posts with tags. My cousin Jake sent me a note on Facebook. "You're all over next door, dude." As it turned out, Linda had no intention of letting the evening pass in silence. She had gone all out, released a lengthy, enraged tirade on her public social media accounts about how I had emotionally exploited a young girl at a vulnerable moment, ruined a professional event, and abducted her daughter on her birthday. She portrayed me as a resentful, unstable black sheep who used nostalgia as a weapon to turn Emily against her own mother and cut her apart from her family. She shared photos of the banquet hall online, showing unopened food, empty chairs, and her standing next to the DJ in a distressed state. Hundreds of people responded to it. It mentioned several local parents who sympathized with her. "What a disaster," one individual wrote. "If someone did it to my kid, I would be devastated." She had even marked my job profile, saying that my recurring emotional instability made me unqualified to oversee community tech initiatives. It hurt. Yes, my freelancing business was little, but I put a lot of effort into earning my clients' confidence. Once broken, that type of reputation travels quickly. After reading it twice, I read it again and again. My chest tightened every time. She was lying, but that wasn't all. It came so naturally to her. How she was able to make herself the victim and distort reality so completely. I briefly thought about letting things go and simply riding the wave. People would eventually forget, correct? Then I received a text from Emily. She seized my laptop and phone after searching my room. I was grounded by everything, said that I lack the emotional maturity to make my own choices. She's also attempting to have me removed from my gym program unless I change my ways. The guilt hit me hard at that point. It was no longer just about me. Now she was punishing Emily for her independent thought. I woke up to more texts the next morning. Of all people, my mom had left a passive-aggressive remark on Aunt Linda's page. I always said that Ryan needed assistance. It had pleased my uncle. Some of my cousins made ambiguous remarks, such as "so sad when family turns on each other." Nobody had questioned me about what had truly transpired. Aside from one individual, one of Emily's former babysitters, Sarah, was frequently present when we were younger. She sent me a message. "Therefore, you don't sound like the post. What is the truth?" I emailed her the actual pictures, the cake, and the decorations. Emily laughing, "I'm happy and gentle." I then forwarded her the screen grabs of Emily expressing her desire to visit my home, thanking me, and stating that she didn't want to be there. Sarah answered in a single sentence, "Let me assist you." At first, I didn't understand her, but 2 hours later, she uploaded a completely different story to her page, publicly marked and accompanied by receipts. She described how Aunt Linda had always micromanaged Emily's life, how she had pulled Emily from a school play because the costume wasn't dignified, how she used guilt and control under the guise of concern, and how she made appearances, not people, her top priority. When Sarah allowed Emily to eat pizza for dinner rather than grilled salmon, she even alluded to Aunt Linda's attempt to have her fired from her previous babysitting job. She shared screen grabs of messages Emily had sent her months prior, in which she vented about her mother. It blew up after Sarah had saved it when she became anxious. People began to ask questions and leave comments. Then others joined in, a retired teacher, an old coach, or even a neighbor. People told stories, one by one, minor details. However, they presented a completely different image when stacked, and Linda made an effort to defend herself. Naturally, they said it was all a lie, but things were starting to change. It was just the beginning, but I wish I could say that was the end of it. I received an email 2 days later. Not mine, not from a lawyer, not from a relative, apparently hers. And now Linda was more than angry. Her intention was to sue me. When I saw the lawyer's name in my email, I didn't freak out. My stomach dropped. Yes. However, this seemed inevitable given all Aunt Linda had previously thrown at me. She was no longer only attempting to make me seem bad. Her goal was to destroy me. And if this experience taught me anything, it was that individuals like her don't give up until they are compelled to. In addition to threatening defamation charges for publicly insulting the reputation of a well-respected community member and planning an event intended to undermine parental authority, the cease and desist letter was filled with legalese and pomp. Her attorney insisted that I apologize publicly, remove any mention of the party, and pay $5,000 in damages to my reputation. Something inside of me exploded at that moment. For years, I had dismissed things, played the laid-back person, stayed out of arguments, and allowed others to change my story because it was simpler than playing the villain. For the first time, though, I recognized how much I had allowed her to influence my life, even in silence, when I read that letter. So I retaliated. I didn't get legal counsel. I turned into one. Near enough, but not quite. I researched as much as I could on defamation law, particularly in our state. During the course of the following 48 hours, I contacted a buddy of a friend who works as a paralegal, and she gave me an overview. After that, I wrote my own letter. Nor sentimental, nor petty. Just be honest, meticulous. I reacted by dissecting each of her cease and desist statements and providing screenshots, timestamps, receipts, and eyewitness accounts. I clarified how her article was defamatory and actionable, as it falsely accused me of crimes, including kidnapping. I made it plain at the end of the letter that I would take legal action for defamation, harassment, and harm to my professional image if she did not take back her public charges and remove the post within 72 hours. Her attorney replied, "I see," and forwarded it via an approved email tracker. The following morning, the post was gone, but I wasn't finished. Because she had not recognized how many people had turned against her while she was preoccupied with acting queen on her eroding throne, she pulled strings to freeze Emily's membership, and the local gym board was inundated with complaints. Screenshots taken from Emily's communications. Public opposition. In a secret Facebook group for young athletes, Emily even posted a brief message in which she described how her mother had attempted to silence her because she wanted to be herself one night. She was unanimously restored by the board. They also severed their sponsorship relationship with Aunt Linda. The photographer from Voyage Weekly then arrived. As it happens, he hadn't liked being misled either. Instead of being ambushed at a phony party where Emily had already made it plain she didn't want to go, he had been informed that she would be entering a staged coming-of-age photo shoot. He published his own post. "This is simply a courteous explanation, nothing spectacular. Press coverage should never take precedence over respecting a young woman's limits." Her impact on social media was destroyed. Sponsors departed. Friends grew apart. People began to notice a trend as they recalled all the small instances of micromanaging, guilt-tripping, and side remarks. However, Emily's relocation out a few weeks later was the true triumph. She had discreetly accumulated money through a couple babysitting jobs and a part-time job here. With a little assistance from a scholarship advisor and Sarah, she got a room in a shared apartment close to her university. On the day she moved in, she emailed me a picture. She was standing next to a box of mismatched markings in a little kitchen, smiling. The caption, "I appreciate you getting me here." Linda attempted to twist it, said that no one believed Emily's story that she was fleeing because she had been brainwashed. The mask was too badly damaged. I, on the other hand, didn't disappear into the background. Thanks to others who appreciated my ability to advocate for myself, I was able to secure larger freelancing jobs. After seeing the turmoil, a few clients genuinely appreciated my handling of it, said that it demonstrated honesty. One even described me as quite professional for a jeans-wearing guy. Figure it out. The finest aspect? My cousin Jake's wedding was the next family get-together. I had walked in. Hello, no uncomfortable looks at Linda, no whispering, remained silent. Simply turn your head away. I gave Emily a firm embrace and a miniature framed replica of her sparkler birthday picture. There was no need for us to speak. She muttered, "You know, she still thinks you ruined her party," while grinning and tucking it under her arm. I smiled. I said, "I didn't damage it. The genuine one I kept." I also didn't feel like the family let me down for once. When I accomplished something correctly at last, I felt like I was the only one.